everyone. Sorry for the delay, but we're all here. And thank you so much for coming out today. We're really looking forward to having a robust and interesting and stimulating conversation. My name is Nikita. I'm from the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, also known as Accord. And we're here today to host our new Global Peace Initiative together with the city of Ekurhuleni. So Global Peace is essentially a space we've created as Accord to try to address some of the development issues that we're seeing as a global collective. So when I say this, I mean not the issues that we have locally alone, but also the issues that are at a broader global scale that impact us as a collective. So I speak of climate change, I speak of rising inequality, systems that are integrated in a global system that we need to address as a collective. So this is what Global Peace is attending to currently, and how we do this is through these dialogue forums. So the dialogue forums will be hosting in 100 cities across the world. We've hosted so far in Ghana and in Japan, and this Ekurhuleni dialogue is essentially our first South African dialogue, and we're looking forward to coming up with very South African local insights and esoteric insights on what our communities face. So essentially the model for these global dialogues is to have an intergenerational dialogue and intersectorial, in that our panelists are representatives of different sectors in society, be it academia, local government, the private sector, or civil society. We also have private sector. So that's the intention for the format and the structure of the dialogue. Once we have this dialogue at this forum, we will then hand over our structure to the Ekurhuleni government. Thereafter, they will be able to implement at a local level with their own communities and have more local insights to what issues need to be addressed, and to not only identify the issues, but also come up with the solutions that work best for our communities. So to start off, I'll introduce my facilitator, Matthew Kimball, and then thereafter he'll introduce your panelists. We're going to have a stimulating conversation, and we hope that you have questions to ask as well, because we'll be having a plenary session at the end of the dialogue session, just to augment the insights and see if there were any issues that you think weren't raised as well. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed the dialogue.
Thank you, Nikita, and again, just to reiterate, thanks to all of you who are in attendance, as well as your patience with us, and to say welcome to the first South African Intergenerational Dialogue. As a person who works full-time on Global Peace and the projects, it's great to be here. We're especially excited given our venue today, given the support that we've had from the city of Ekurhuleni, which we can't be more say enough thanks for, and of course to be constantly reminded about the great works of great Tata Tambo. So I think we couldn't find a more better suited place to have this conversation, so especially as the first one in South Africa. But I'm a Durban boy, so you're not here to listen to what I have to say about global issues in the context of Ekurhuleni, but we do have some great local speakers, so allow me to introduce them in absolutely no particular order. So we have Tamara Naidu, who's a program officer for international relations at Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, which I definitely got wrong, sorry. We also then have with us Advocate Sipho Mantula, who's a researcher at the Institute for the Dispute Resolution in Africa, College of Law and University of South Africa. We have Simphiwe Zuma, who is an accountant, but also is the Vice President of JCI Santon, and we're very excited to have JCI with us because they are one of our global partners. So, and then we also have Advocate Modise Kodlela, who's the divisional head of the Youth Directorate for the municipality and the city of Ekurhuleni. So firstly, just to say thank you so very much for making time to join us, and we're very excited. I'm now going to come and sit with you because it's weird if I stand up here. And then I think we can just roam with this mic. I think let's get straight into the conversation. Advocate, if we can talk about, we exist in a society that recently posted its highest unemployment figures. We are now faced with the fourth industrial revolution that is threatening what jobs there are from a municipality context. And I'll also swing this question because I think it's a broad one to everyone else as well. But what are the challenges that exist and within Ekurhuleni, and what are the solutions that are being invested in by the city?
Thanks, Matthew. I think the issue of unemployment, particularly in Ekurhuleni, is one would describe as a quarter skew, because if you look at the 2017-2018 surveys, it indicates that Ekurhuleni would be one of the highest metros in terms of its job contribution, for lack of a better word. In other words, in terms of employment opportunities. But our stats in the Youth Directorate show, it shows that, okay, maybe let me start here. Our stats show, one, that there's only about 4% of the residents in Ekurhuleni that have a post-matric qualification. 15% have a matric. And you link that with the fact that Ekurhuleni's unemployment statistics, they are higher than the national statistics of 27.7%. In Ekurhuleni, it's 28.8%. Now, it's bizarre in that if you compare that to the fact that Ekurhuleni contributes so much to this countries, or as a metro, to job opportunities. It's a manufacturing hub. It's the manufacturing hub of Africa. And yet the unemployment statistics are so low, or higher in fact, than the national average. Then you can see that there's quite an imbalance in that regard. But being that, as it may, you can already start driving a link, a simple link or rendered by the undereducated states of the residents of Ekurhuleni. So it poses a great challenge for us as socio-economic development practitioners, particularly for young people, because it means that we need to develop strategies that are centered around undereducated residents, some uneducated residents. But also, what it's also challenged us to do is that it's challenged us to start knocking at the doors of the private sector, because the city itself employs about almost 18,800 people. We cannot employ anymore. But you find that the big manufacturing hubs, they don't abide by the principle of local. Maybe it's because by the fact that we are undereducated. So those are some of the challenges that we have as a city. We held a youth unemployment summit in Youth Month in June, where we invited our private sector to come on board to actually assist the city in curbing this issue of youth unemployment. It's a national crisis, as declared by our President Ramaphosa. Because if you look at the general unemployment, the official and general unemployment when it comes to youth, it means that you've got almost 69% young people who are unemployed. That's a crisis by any standard. We looked at our BRICS countries, we did research with some of our BRICS countries, and you find populations such as, for example, China. It's got one of the biggest populations in the world, about 1.2 billion people. Their unemployment statistics are sitting at about 6%. So it's a crisis. It can only be described as a quarter skew. It's completely bizarre. When it comes to the fourth industrial revolution, I don't think that the fourth industrial revolution will be an enemy to job creation. We had part of our youth month, the what we call the drone buildathon, where we were exposing young people to opportunities within the fourth industrial revolution and how we can effect service delivery through using drones, for an example. And those are 4IR opportunities, but as it would seem, all 4IR opportunities are such that they are all man-handled. They require a new form of education, new form of curriculum, a new form of youth. So it's one of those things that we looked into and we are looking into. We are starting to now shape the direction for our youth to start thinking about opportunities within the 4IR. We were saying to young people, like, if for an example you want to study marketing in its current form, then you are misleading yourself, because those opportunities are soon going to subside. there's digital marketing, there's so many other platforms, there's so many other opportunities. And my fellow council maybe will agree now, even in the legal fraternity, there's so many other people are able to now prepare their own papers, go to court using apps. So it means that youth, or the new youth, needs to start redefining themselves within the 4IR. It's not an enemy of progress or jobs, but as the city, we're looking at to how do we expose young people to more of these things. As we said now, I was saying to you, Matthew, earlier, there's a science fair that's happening, hosted by the city right now in Germiston, which is also looking at young people, especially at the age, as far as grade 9, as to which technological science and technological aspects they should start looking into within the 4IR. So it does possess challenges, but it's opportunity, and with opportunity, particularly in technology, it might assist not just the Ekurhuleni but the country in catching up to the economic disparities that it finds itself in.
Great, thank you. But I think interestingly, building from there, Simpiwe, if I can ask you to join in, is to say, for me, a few of the key things there was, especially in relation to private sector, what can or can't be done there, and then this idea of, you phrased it as the new youth, and how that can be, if that needs to be created, and how that gets created through education, and the potential to view the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution as an opportunity.
Thank you, Matthew. And certainly I do agree that there is a role that the private sector can play in particularly addressing the issue of unemployment. I think where our biggest challenge is with South Africa is there's a skills mismatch or disalignment where it comes to young people have gone out and studied, and they're sitting at home with diplomas and degrees. And the issue is private sector or even government sector, there are opportunities, but the opportunities are not aligned to the skills that they have. So a great initiative that the government has actually come up with to bring in that alignment, because people are standing, waiting for jobs or applying for jobs, but not being hired due to a lack of experience or due to a lack of skills. Private sector can then step in and provide opportunities or programs where they can support in building the skills in the young people in order for them to be able to participate in jobs. So the YES program is one of the initiatives I think that we're moving in the right direction as a country that's been initiated, where government is saying let's work together with the private sector in exposing young people to opportunities. One of the ways that they're also doing it is over and above just encouraging private sector to take on people as employees and exposing them to opportunities. It's more of going to ground roots and saying, in these local communities, what are the opportunities where private sector, let's invest in creating a hub where people can come through and learn administration skills, interviewing skills, or whatever skills they might need in order to empower themselves. So there's a partnership that private sector can take on, not necessarily taking on people to employ them because there may be limited spaces and jobs, but also empowering them with skills. One of the other ways as a country that we haven't explored is entrepreneurship. I think there's an opportunity where graduates can actually be empowered with skills to start their own businesses and thereby creating an environment where they can employ other people. So instead of targeting these three specific sectors being government, private sector and civil society, let's actually look within ourselves in creating employment. So I think private sector can play a role in partnering in developing skills in young people. And in terms of the fourth industrial revolution, I think there's a big part for South Africa to play in introducing technology as part of the curriculum as early as possible. Firstly from primary school, but then also introducing, for example, my colleague here said in terms of marketing, if you go out today and do a marketing degree or diploma, you can't expect the same way that marketing was taught a few years ago to be the same way it's taught today in order for a person to go out into the job market. We need to move with the times. One of the things as an accountant that is a passion of mine is The accounting profession was identified as a profession that will become extinct in the future as we know it. But actually, the opportunities that are posed by the fourth industrial revolution are, you need to rethink the way you used to do business. Take it on as an opportunity to say, how do I upskill myself so that I use the technology provided by the fourth industrial revolution to empower myself in order to then add skills and values that only human can. And I think there's an opportunity in education, from primary school education, and also just transforming the curriculum at varsity level to accommodate for what the markets are looking for.
I think there's a lot of agreement that there's opportunity and things that can be done. But Sipho, if I can ask you specifically, even if those opportunities could exist, is our society, and especially locally within Ekurhuleni, is it ready to take on these opportunities, or are these just opportunities that are nice to say but won't be able to take effect? And then going slightly broader, because I think the challenges we're speaking about are very pertinent and need to be addressed urgently. Likewise, we're sitting in a place that's trying to address environmental issues. Is our society ready to deal with those challenges at the same time as dealing with unemployment?
Thank you, Dumelang Molweni. I think what is very key from what the colleagues are saying, we have to be honest and be realistic that in the 25 years of democracy and freedom in this country, communities are not only looking for opportunities, but communities are pleading for even respect for the basic human rights. And I think what has been happening is that whether we are talking about employment opportunities, but we have not dealt with the issue around 24-hour economy in this country. We have not dealt with the questions around reparation, because the youth of this country have a history that apartheid benefited the few. And post-1994, we see corruption as the major threat to these communities. So I don't think we have to be raising opportunities because the absence of peace, it is because people are angry and we have community protest on a daily basis. And when you look at their demands, it is all about jobs, water, housing, respect for the elderly. So I think opportunities, even if we can have good laws, I think things that are still boiling is that we need to give communities the voice. We need our leaders to be accountable, and it should start from the local municipalities. If we have an ineffective ward council and an ineffective ward committees, then how do we even have a hope for the ordinary communities? Because local municipalities have what they call integrated development plans. But in those plans, is there job opportunities for the young people? You look at the issues that were raised by the colleagues, the fourth industrial revolution, it is something that in the post-2000, people were talking about globalization. Now we are moving to another concept. And nobody, Matthew, is talking even about agricultural revolution in this country, because communities, the main threat that Africa and this region is facing now is the food security. And I don't think we can talk about peace without even justice. Hence, I was raising the issue of reparation to even communities. Environmental degradation, I think I will come later around it about the solution, because we can't lament about the dirtiness that we see in our own communities, where we see the water moving everywhere. Is it because somebody has not even alerted municipality about the water? The dumpings that we see in our own communities. So one will say that we cannot even look outside Africa or outside South Africa. We have to look best practices within communities of practice or within our own provinces in this country. Ekurhuleni, it is like it was said, it is the city of peace, but we see conflicts here. Since 1990s, this is one area that it has gone through conflict, but it has not healed. You know, you look at the TRC reports around this area, people want to just talk about the TRC and many other issues, but they've not gone into the youth and the mothers and the women of this region to say, how do we respect them, how do we give them recognition that is due. So I think for me, those are my introductory points to say that we need to respect the basic human rights of the people of Ekurhuleni.
I think a great point to carry on from there, if you will, Tamara, is are we genuinely in looking so far into the future and saying what's going to happen, how do we address problems, forgetting, as was just said, to look back and see those injustices and recognize that those need to be dealt with before we go forward, or is it a simultaneous process, or, yeah?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is a can of worms. I mean, absolutely. I think agency comes from pride as well, from understanding the community, from understanding your history. And I applaud the city of Ekurhuleni for standing up like this and, you know, taking as a local municipality initiative to start some of these dialogues. And I hear it now and again on the radio, hosting events and this and that. You know, giving people, I mean, not just from Ekurhuleni, but also from other parts of South Africa, a taste of what's going on here. So I believe that this agency needs to come from the people themselves. It cannot be awarded, it cannot come from outside. We need people to be accessing their local municipalities. And I mean, I don't mean this just in terms of speaking and having an ear to listen to from the officials sitting here, but also spatially. We need people being able to, you know, have good roads. Also, there's, for instance, the example of Medellin in Colombia, which was also for, I guess, in the 70s or something, way before my time. But it was fraught with corruption, all sorts of violence, drug trafficking, and all sorts of things. And what they did in the city, because it was also spatially divided, they had the poor living in one section in quite an inaccessible area, and then the wealthy, the middle class, they lived in the center of the city. So of course the poor had to migrate or commute every day into the city, which would take 2 hours or something because of the poor infrastructure. So what they've done in the last 25 years is to look at the spatial dynamics. They built in fact some sort of conveyor, sort of like those what do you call those trams, like by Table Mountain and stuff, because Medellin is divided by a sort of cliff or mountain range. And this made it more accessible for not only those living in the poorer areas to access the city center, but also for those in the city center to come and bring their capital to the different areas within the city. And 25 years later, this type of renewed spatial planning is seen as a way to address this type of violence and frustration, and also to rectify the injustices that have kept these communities separated in the past. And so what does it take to get there? I mean, I'm coming as well from more of a labor trade union perspective. It's organizing. All because many people, like, they're not in the formal economy, they still are in the informal economy, and they are somehow surviving, hustling. They have side jobs, they have part-time work, or they're creating their own thing. They need to organize themselves and put forward their message. And that needs to go to the local municipality. I think the national government is overburdened. We know that in terms of small businesses or entrepreneurs, there's all sorts of red tape, issues of accessing capital. And this is where these initiatives need to be situated on the side. And this is also, there's the example of social entrepreneurs. They identify a lack in the community, something that needs to be addressed, and they create then little businesses around this. So this type of education, these new forms of education, these need to come about, and that will give people a sense of dignity in being able to, into changing their lives, the trajectory of their lives. And one term that I absolutely love right now is called Afrofuturism. I think, of course, the issues that that people survive with on an everyday, not having access to water and these basic needs, and you know, they are horrific. But how do we re-envision the society so that we can find the strength and the will to come together and do something and create a new society that is more inclusive together? We need a goal, and without this type of visionary leadership, which hopefully will come on a local municipality level, because that's the basis of where we can work from. That's where, as citizens, we have individual agency to do something, to hold officials to account, to suggest ideas on how to improve our communities. this needs to go somewhere. And with that, we need great ideas, and that's where we need this new form of youth putting their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's about time to bring it back to government, because two key questions here. The first is how do we create this access to government, and then secondly, because I think it's not just about community and government, it's also importantly within community. And I think especially one of the pillars that Global Peace is trying to address is how do we have and create shared values and a shared understanding, so that it's not just a case of you versus government, or me as a KZN versus a Gauteng, or even more locally than that. How do we start those conversations so that it's so that we don't have those same frictions within or tribalisms or communityisms within our society?
Yes, thanks. Look, I think when it comes to the values are there, and one of the things that I know from our directorate, especially the youth directorate, that we are shying away of, is the obsession with talk shops. Because we'll talk, and for example, if you want to speak about values, they're set out, not just in the constitution, but within our structures as the municipalities. You speak about principles such as Batupele and so forth, which are shared values of what we must do in terms of connecting with the community. So the nexus is not between the community per se and government. The hidden arm, or the missing arm in that, is the private sector. And I think the problem is that there's not much emphasis that the community, or there's not much burden that the community is placing on the private sector. And the community is entitled to burden the private sector in the manner that it burdens government. Us as governments, our role primarily is to create that enabling environment so that society or the community can effect their own socio-economic emancipation. So we must start to move away from the values and all these other issues that we have already resolved as government. The second issue you asked was
within communities and those values. So we might all agree in terms of the constitution where all our values lie, but when it comes down to it practically, within communities we don't often see that. I think harking back to xenophobia.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yes. So due to this lack, or this missing arm, or this missing functioning called the private sector, and not by no means am I as an official passing the buck on the private sector, but due to this missing arm, we find that the socio-economic infrastructure in South Africa creates these social ills that government now needs to respond to. For an example, these social ills of xenophobia, I'll make a classic example about this very community that we are here in. At some point or the other, when in my previous life, I had to present the community here who ousted our Pakistani, Somalian brothers who've got spaza shops. Now, they had them everywhere in this community, in this place here called Tambo and Watville. And yes, it was perceived or seen as a sociological disorder or xenophobia, but it was just merely a scrum for scrap. It was a scramble for economic opportunities, for spaza shop. It's the basic form of business and trade within this community. But the reason, or the reason why you'll find people fighting for such basic issues is that they've got no access to economic opportunities. So there's no regulatory, or there's no consistent framework that assists people to link them up to these economic opportunities, and then society or the community starts to fight amongst itself for the scraps. And then, however, when the confrontation comes, it's not going to be the community, or it starts with the community amongst itself, then it comes to government. So there's no real effort from maybe say the community against the private sector. So for us to move forward, we really start to create a conversation whereby we put more pressure on the private sector to ensure that it comes on board. Otherwise, we'll always have this rotational back and forth around the society and government.
Thank you. So then, Simpiwe, seeing as now the ball's been thrown, I won't say passed, but that the private sector is now being included, how does the private sector get more involved if it needs to get more involved, and especially in relation to things like local communities and the tensions that may or may not exist within those communities?
Thank you, Matt. I think where the missing gap is, I think the private sector has stepped in to a certain degree in terms of providing corporate social responsibility initiatives. However, when we're not all sitting at the same table and deciding together, then there's a mismatch. I may, as the private sector, for example, say, we are providing the following opportunities, we are going to equip people with skills on technology and so forth, but actually what people are crying for are the things that are in the basic communities, the people that are sitting day to day, waking up, watching TV the entire day and the next day and the next day, and then getting frustrated, even starting these xenophobic attacks. So it's a matter of us as private sector together with local government, and I think there are lots of conversations happening at national level, but there's never a time where we come down and we actually sit with the ground roots where we say, what are the issues within the communities that we are operating in, and what do you need as local government for us to support you? So what local government is doing is these initiatives where we're hosting these conversations. People come and share their frustrations, but the missing, as my colleague from local government is saying, that in his view, private sector is not coming to the table, or they're not taking the responsibility. Yet where private sector is sitting, we've shared and we've shared, but we're actually not communicating with one another, so there's a mismatch in what we're providing and what is needed. And I think perhaps the conversation there needs to come down to local government, and wherever you are as a private sector company operating, what are you doing in that community? What are the frustrations of that community, and how do we together partner to address them?
I do just want to slightly shift the conversation. So first of all, thank you, but Advocate, you mentioned that you had some thoughts on environmental issues, so I do just want to try and shift the conversation there. No doubt when we open it up to the floor, we'll have more issues around what we've been speaking on. But how do we address the major challenges that we're facing environmentally, and more specifically, how do we address those from a community and a local level?
Matthew, I think that we are aware that we have different ministries, but education as well, it is one area that we should be working on. I think us earlier taking this tour here was to show that the environmental options, going green, it is something that this country must look into. The issue of refuse collection, we cannot leave it to the local municipality only. The issue of cleaning at schools, the issue around conservation, planting trees in these communities, and fruit trees mostly, trees that will bring life, even in some instances, the issue of using cultures. I think colleagues, when they raise the issue of Afrophobia, again, it is not a stress on government, but it is the stress that frustration and anger comes out of communities, because they are waiting for many things since 1994. And they see people coming and going and making business in their own country or in their own corners. And maybe, Matthew, because I know that you've asked me about it, but the issue around privatization, what was running in my head is the state-owned enterprise. I think we are very silent around it, that we had more than 100 state-owned enterprises that have wasted millions and billions in this country. And we cannot let them off the hook without explaining that in Ekurhuleni per se, you have SAA, South African Airways. You look at the case studies that I will only give too quickly. Ethiopia is running its own Ethiopian Airlines as a nationalized Ethiopian Airlines, and it is making a lot of profits. Despite what people might have said about that incident, but Ethiopian Airlines, it is generating a lot of money. But we have SAA just around our corner here, that has been asking for bailouts and bailouts. Now, that's why I'm raising the issue of the state-owned enterprise. Before Ria Pierre was caught up with the issues of the Marikana, Ria Pierre came up with a report around the state-owned enterprise. How are we going to be dealing with state-owned enterprise? The issue of ESCOM, we cannot leave it just to go just like that. And finally, the second example of Rwanda, Muganda. In Rwanda, every last Saturday of every month, the whole community clean. They clean, they plant, they do everything. And they don't ask government or maybe president should be the one leading that initiative. So I think maybe when President Ramaphosa in one of the parliamentary briefings, he spoke about the first week of every month. But it seems that somewhere how the president and the premiers and the mayors are now in a deep sleep of not understanding that, but people must work in a sense that the cleanness that is in our neighborhood, it brings consciousness, it brings even the issue of the recycling. That is another economy in itself, just to even recycle. Hence I'm raising environmental consciousness, and as well as the issue of pollution. We have even pollution, the same private sector you have been talking about. Some of them are the worst polluters. Pollution that we are having in our neighborhood, the issue around the building of our communities of asbestos, houses that were built on asbestos in our communities, those companies need to be sued. So for me, Matt, is that I cannot just say everything is rosy and it's fine without us going into the deeper challenges that are facing South Africa.
And then I really like the point of creating individual action, but I think the question tomorrow is how do we create that? And then also one sector that we haven't really picked on today, and I'd like to say it's because the civil society is so great coming from it myself. But what is the role for civil society to play? We've spoken very clearly about government and private, and now I think let's continue the conversation about individuals, but also where does civil society fit into this?
Yeah, within civil society, what I would like to put emphasis on is the political parties. Where are they supporting local government, and how are they? It's their role, I feel, to promote values that will bring us together. Supporting freedom, solidarity, addressing inequality. That needs to come from a moral or ethical obligation, and that's where this is why we have these political parties, in order to organize ourselves and put forward these ideals. So I think that when it comes to, addressing these injustices, civil society, of course, has stood up. There are many South African NGOs out there addressing all sorts of issues, but also being caught for a lot of nonsense, like the Live Esidimeni. I was just hearing on the radio today, some more NGOs were charged. So, holding ourselves as civil society to account is another problem. There used to be an organization called Songoku, which was a sort of umbrella, the NGO Council of South Africa. And unfortunately, that sort of fell apart. And that was also before my time. I'd be curious what exactly led to that. But I miss, as someone working within the civil society, working at an NGO, I really do miss having someone that's going to coordinate us and transform the sector. NGOs themselves are can equally be accused of all these evils, of corruption. There's been stories in the newspapers of sexual harassment, of racism within the NGOs. So I think as civil society, this is where also the role of the media comes up. That's where we're getting a lot of the access to news. And not just national and large publications, but media within communities. So I think that we have a lot to look at in terms of looking at how media is currently constructed. Their business models. Why are certain stories not being followed up on? What is the quality of investigative journalism? Because it needs to look into civil society, government, private sector, all of us together. Yeah.
I'm going to start the Q&A with the audience, but I think just before that, if I can give each speaker literally 1 minute to just summarize their thoughts, and we have sent out all the questions previously, so on those thematics. But I kind of developed an order, so let me keep it going through that order.
Okay, I was not prepared, but I think just on that, to effect global peace, to effect any form of or sustain any form of peace, we need to ensure that, as my colleague speaks about, a proper modality of sustaining or a proper way of eradicating the socio-economic imbalances. There's no other way. There's no other way. As long as we're not aligned to the socio-economic imbalances, all social ills will keep following society. We'll still be faced with xenophobia. We'll still be faced with high crime and. I think that's the major component of it. The second part is that the best way to advance at least economic transformation is to embrace technology, embrace the changing tide in the economy through technology. It's the only way that countries or developing countries like South Africa have a chance of catching up. And with that, within the technological boom, the fourth industrial revolution, and the so-called new economies, I'm of the firm view that we need to set aside those new economies for young people, for youth. Because when something is new, right, there's no experience. So, because they always deter us and say, you need experience, you need that, but if something is new, there's no experience, and the people who guide and drive it are the people who are the implementers and the designers of those particular projects in technology. So that's the discussion I think we should be obsessed about. And the moment we speak about new economies, technology boom, then obviously it means that it must first find presence within the type of education and the education system that we have as a country. We've got an opportunity. Every generation, every administration has been coming up with some or other kind of form of education curricula based on the needs. I don't see it, unfortunately, with our administration right now. We should be having, like we had OBE at some point, or what this or the other, or CAPS. There should be a new a curricula starting with this administration that focuses on technology. Thanks.
In my final words, I just think before we can hold all the different sectors accountable, we as young people need to take action. In terms of, we can't continuously expect the government sector or private sector to respond, or if we as a society, as South Africans, we tend to have a sense of entitlement. And I think that's a mindset shift that we need to take, where we say, yes, we want the change, but what am I doing as a young person to impact that? Hold yourself accountable before we can even hold. For example, even coming to who we vote for as government. Do we actually apply ourselves in selecting the people that are going to lead our country? Are they carrying the mandate that we want them to carry? Because ultimately it's our future that they're representing. Are we sitting at the right tables? Are we positioning ourselves to be part of the conversation that is driving our future forward? My colleague mentioned the frustrations that lead to protests around the country, but yet continuously we give the same people the power. So are we challenging the conversation, and are we actually taking the right steps? I think change begins with us. Peace in our communities begins with us taking the necessary action. I also think get involved wherever you are, be it at work or be it in your local community. Stand up as a young leader and be part of the conversation to transforming your environment. Let us not be fearful also of opportunities that are coming, be it, for example, if we look at the likes of Rwanda today, they've been able to transform their communities not because there were certain people who were driving the agenda. Everyone is brought into the vision of the president, and they are all taking part. If the responsibility of keeping your local community clean is your responsibility, everyone is taking part. So let's not shift responsibility. Let's stand up as young people and say, what is my role in my community, in my business, in order to drive the change I want to see?
I will think that in my summation of thoughts, I've emphasized on the basic human rights, respect of human dignity. And I think in a simple language, humanity is pleading. It cannot be humanity that we are not going to even respect nature and even environment. So it is very critical on that stand. And I think the part of education, even if I didn't go into it, I think peace education, legal education in the schools, it is very critical. and as well as to look back into our past, our history. We should not only looking at the past without crafting tomorrow or maybe the future. And then I think one aspect that it has been running in my head is the issue of sports and culture and music. How do we use sports, arts and culture in finding people together in some instance without going deeper into issues? And I think the issue that I raise again, accountability, it is key. And the issue of state-owned enterprise, I think that issue, I will still raise it, that we need to rescue them, but it must be community-owned, and communities must take pride of engaging with governments. And I think what my colleague has said on the role of media as well, it is very critical that we need even a conscious media. People are using social media, but whatever they are raising on the media, the issue of Afrophobia, what's happening in Soweto, in Joburg now, we cannot come and sit and talk about peace as if there is no conflict happening around Gauteng province. So we should be saying, even on the social media, the fake news that people are sending should be challenged, and the role of media, even how they interpret the tensions that we see in townships, and the culture of humanity, of both. How do we respect others and understand that Africa is still not leading, but Africa is bleeding?
For me, it's the intergenerational debate, if I can just re-add that aspect, because I've been to so many meetings where I start talking, and I might not know the history that well, but the older people, their eyes glaze over and like, oh gosh, this isn't taking us anywhere. So, I really value these type of interactions and the importance of that within the global peace dialogue that you're hosting, Accord. With that, there's the further dynamic on that is the link between the international and domestic. There is huge pressure on our generation. We're so connected thanks to globalization with the pros and the cons. Some of the cons, killed industry, textile industry, leather industry, whatever industry you're looking at in South Africa, it's been negatively affected, which is affecting then the community level and the ability for local municipalities to generate income. So that's one aspect that's important, the global challenge of climate change, or the climate crisis, actually. So we're seeing here, you can't grow your plants, having farm stock is a problem, even just living conditions in severe heat or severe cold. People are struggling to stay alive. So, this requires the international, so communities reaching out to other cities, to communities across the world who are going through similar issues, and together taking responsibility for this, the degradation of the environment. And most important, in order to do that, we have to use formal spaces of policy. It's important to have protests. It's important for these protests to be recognized by the government. But there must also be these informal conversations where we can reach across and engage about where we are going to go on these issues. So the international and the domestic link are critical. Arms flow, another one. Arms coming from Mozambique, or in South Africa, we also manufacture arms. Saudi Arabia wants to buy them from us. We might be causing more trouble in the Middle East than some of us might be aware. So yeah, we have a huge responsibility in our generation to know what's going on in the world and fight for human rights.
Thank you so very much. To everyone that has spoken so far, I think some really great insights. It's always, it's a good discussion when, as you sit in there taking notes, you go, oh, I need to look into that, or I hadn't thought of that. So thank you very much for the insights. Nikita, I see you have a mic. Yes? Yes. So we can just dedicate some time now to taking any questions that have developed in your mind. So if there are any from the floor, just raise your hand and Nikita will come and find you. Or comments, or your own thoughts on it. They don't necessarily have to be questions.
Good day, people. Good day, people. I have a few remarks to make from the depth of my heart. How many people of Watburg today are in this meeting? Was this meeting properly organized by who? Or simply by passerbys who are going to tell us a good story? Not of peace, but of pieces. I'll relate a story that I shared with my American guys when I visited America. Imagine somebody who is attending a tournament of blind boxers, two of them. And the referee himself is in trouble. How to control that? You people sitting there, you are telling us of your sins, but you are not ready to repent. How am I going to share this with my people in Watford? Because to tell you the truth, best strategists of the struggle of today were caucusing in this place. Our record. The caretaker asked me a funny question when I had to answer that. He's saying, Mr. Makubane, where are the Watford people? You're always here, but where are the people? People no more trust you all together. If this was truthful, what you're saying to us, categorically tell us the follow-up meetings to tell the good story that you bring to us, or to scrutinize it for the best of the community. Who are you really representing, you people? Are you simply passerby to tell the world that we were in Watford and other places and get the glory at the expense of the communities? What is your understanding about community? Where's community? I'm not representing a lot of people. 80%, if not more, of the people, they still not trust you with all your glorious stories. Thank you.
Can I answer Matthew?
Let's take a few and then we can deal with them all.
Hi. My question is with regards to accessing local government, because as young people, if you go into your local government office and you're asked to access a simple thing such as an IDP, it then becomes a problem. How can we work with our councils, because we are there as young leaders who say we want to work with you in order to address issues that we are seeing with regards to basic human rights, but we are being denied the access of the IDPs. How do we address that?
My name is Mandla Matondo. I'm the leader of young people in Wadville. I belong to an organization called Patima Wadville Youth Forum. I'm also the speaker of the community of Tambo. I concur with Babu Makubane there. Where was the invitation, Inspector? Who did you invite in Wadville? Who did you tell that you are coming to do this magnitude of program? But I will pass there. In terms of peace, I can hear that you are talking about the private sector, which is they belong to the system called capitalism. Are they willing to create that peace we are talking about? No, they do not. They don't at all. Because of they thrive in the struggle of ordinary people. That's where they are making money. They will never be on board, whether you like it or not. Because of, in terms of unemployment, they are the one that they are paying our people lesser salary so that they could maximize their own profit. Why do they think they will be on board in terms of peace? They are, according to the news of this world, we are told that in terms of AIDS and HIV, it was man-made. If you are creating peace, are you telling them that they must not make money? They will never ever do that. They will never be on board. They will always drive in the vulnerability of people. In terms of xenophobia, what is xenophobia? Is what our people or our community prostrating upon xenophobic or not? That is the question that I must ask. Because of when those three ships came there in Cape Town, They came and exploit our people and kill our people. We agreed to stay with them. We said, okay, it's fine. When Indians came to do those businesses of sugar canes, we agreed and said, no, it's fine, let us stay with them. Pakistanis and Nigeria, they are also coming, killing our people. We must also agree. Is that xenophobic or not? That's the question that we must always ask. Then my last point, no, I'm okay, I've already done.
Good morning. And please don't ask me why I'm saying good morning. In my South Africa, it's always in the morning. My first point, as I've been listening, I'm going to concur with my fellow colleagues in terms of the invite of the white people. But nonetheless, a lot has been said about that. I think you're going to rectify it possibly in a follow-up meeting. Because the initiative that you guys have taken is a good initiative. This platform is very, very important. So that's why we felt so strongly that now the white people were supposed to be sitting here and grasping and contributing accordingly to what you guys are presenting to us. It's very, very important. But nonetheless, like I said, I hope there's going to be a follow-up meeting. I don't know, because I heard when you open up, you said now we're going to have 100 countries or 100 visits to make. Possibly it will be 101. Now, the first point. I will start with, as you've been presenting your presentation in terms of the private sector and the public sector. I've got a concern in terms of the gap. We're talking like issues of education and non-educational people. Now, when you talk about employment, my concern is here. Now, every time when I hear the government or the local government talking about employment, you only focus on those students that are in schools. There are those students that now cannot make it academically. There's no address about that one. And of which is a very critical point that now we need to shift the focal point and concentrate on those ones. The reason why I'm saying that is that now, where are the programs of those schools, of those kids that cannot make it academically? We need to address that one. That is one. Two, the gap between the private sector and the public sector, it's very, very worrying. That is why you find today we're sitting here. If you can jump to Actonville there, you find half of the staff are foreigners working there. Now that addresses to those kids that now couldn't make it academically. So each and every little employment opportunity, it's grasped by the foreigners. That now today you are addressing us as South Africans, as xenophobic people. That's not true. I think it's about time that now both the local government as well as the national government to sit down and find a solution towards this problem, especially the influx control, the influx from the borders, because this is a huge problem. Because now today, all of us, about 80 if not 70% of the South Africans, they can hardly visit Johannesburg. It's invaded. It's taken away from us as South Africans. Is that something that we can be proud of? The day we're going to retaliate and say we don't want to see those people, are you going to say it's xenophobic again? So please, local government and national government, go and deal about this, because now this is getting worse. So my third point, like I said about kids, there are those kids that are gifted in a form of sports. Now, you find us, our government today, that is doing a great job in terms of erecting RDP houses, but now, none of the areas that I have seen that now RDP houses have been erected, that now sports facilities are put into place. We need to address that. You cannot put houses, those houses at the end of the day are going to have kids. Where are those kids going to play? Now we come back today and said now our kids are involved in Yaupes and don't do the crime and don't because we don't put necessary infrastructures for the kids to go and express their talent and their don't do. Somebody has said something very important in a panel there about the media. I'm worried about our media. as much as now the government is doing a great job in terms of addressing issues of crime, addressing issues of inequality, but the media is not doing justice. In a sense that you watch the news, about 90 if not 95% are just negative things. Nothing that is building the community. Now you watch TV between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Almost all the programs are violent programs, fighting the Sibayas and don't the Queen and stuff like that. Those are issues, at the end of the day, our kids, they put into practice. What are we saying about that? So these are small things that now we as South Africans, we take them for granted, and they've got a huge impact. There was a time, I think 3 if not 4 years back, when I saw 2 young boys play with these toy guns. I said to myself that now, when is South Africa going to stop to allow shops to sell these toy guns? Because they're sending a wrong message. Today now we've got a huge number of heists. Where are these things starting? Because now remember, nothing comes from nowhere. There's no smoke without fire. Each and everything that takes place, there's a cause for that. So I think it's about time that now we need now to sit down and get to the core of all this and say, what caused all these things? Because I can tell you now, my fellow South Africans, the whole thing started now when we take over the government in 1994. That's where the whole problem started. But now it's never too late now to revisit that and say, where have we gone wrong? We shouldn't be sitting today now with so many people that are illegally in this country, and we still accommodate them and say it's okay. Like my brother has said, he said it's okay. It's like now we always settle for less. Today, we grew up in Wattville whereby most of our forefathers were running shops. None of any of us today are owning shops in this township. They are all owned by foreigners. Are we saying it's good? So when are we going to say it's enough? Because surely it is enough. But now when we rise up, it's a xenophobia. Another point, I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. This is the last one. There is this one thing that now concerns me most in terms of the bylaws. Especially you find this challenge in townships. Again, it tells and shows that now we tend to have this don't care attitude. Now, you come to every township, there's no dirtiest places like townships in terms of dumping. And it's a concern. Now, what are the programs that both the local government, our national government, together with the provincial government, that are having to curb this problem? I don't know about Joburg. Joburg is worse. Now, there is this one that bothers me most. You find here in Wattville, I've got 3, if not 4, if not 5 streets, where you find these foreigners again, I will call them straight. They are spraying their cars, penal beating in a pavement. The neighbor is suffering from, possibly from TB and stuff like that. Kids are playing, you busy spray painting, penal beating in your doorstep. When are these things going to stop? Because those things are affecting our health, they are affecting our environment, they are affecting our kids, they are affecting the whole thing. Now the question is, when are we that blind as officials of the government? Are we not seeing this thing? Because you driving there, you could see this thing that now these are not supposed to be there. Now the last one, coming to security. We see our own brothers again selling the vegetables, building these small tents and stuff like that. Those small tents later, these thugs, they hide themselves against those tents, those small tents. Murder people, kill people. The question is, when are we going to start to get our South Africa clean? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd just like to add to the dialogue that has happened today and focus more on inequality, because South Africa has the highest inequality in the world. The gap between rich and poor is the highest in the world. What it leads to is social mobility. What do I mean by that? If you are born poor in this country, you are likely to stay poor.
If you are born rich, you are likely to stay rich. Upward mobility from one social class to another is an issue. So to achieve peace, I feel like we have to understand the core, root cause of the issues that we are facing at a local level. And it has to do with inequality, income inequality, which I've spoken about. We can't talk about the fourth industrial revolution if we don't speak about internet inequality. I come from the Eastern Cape. In rural Eastern Cape, Elibode, there's no internet, there's no Wi-Fi. You have to go to town. That leads me to the third inequality of spatial inequality, meaning where I am born affects the opportunities that I'll be exposed to. If I'm born in this community here, and yet the employment stats are showing that urban is where I'll get a job, it means that when I do get that income, 60%, research tells me that 60% of that income is going to be spent on transport because I have to take 3 taxis and a bus and a train to get there on time. As my fellow colleague that just simply drove there to get there in 5 minutes. So I really think to talk about peace is talking about solving core issues. We need to identify amongst ourselves, and it will be different for different communities. I'm pleased to be here. I'm not from this community, because I was at Eastern Cape, but I can add some input on the issues that I see that are common in rural and township South Africa, and it's time that we don't give voice or platform to urbanized voices because they have benefited. The structure of our economy is such that the majority of the population is living in the rural and township areas, yet in media we are seeing urban news. We are not getting the stories about Usimpiwe, who's living in a shack, who doesn't have electricity, who doesn't have access to water, and yet is the young person that then has to feed that household. My last contribution, parking the inequality contribution, is this idea of the creative economy. I think it was raised somewhere here, even in the contribution from the audience, around arts and culture and sport. If you speak to young people, I want to talk about young people because 40% of our population is between the ages of 15 and 34, 39.6% if I'm to be accurate, right? That's a majority. We can't ignore young people in South Africa, we can't ignore young people in Africa. The median age is 20. When you engage with young people, every young person, educated or not, if I ask them about the issues, yes, they'll talk about employment. But if you engage them on their creativity, they'll tell you that I do photography on the side, I'm a poet, I write. And yet we are saying that we've got an issue with media. Let us ask ourselves, who owns the media in our country? If the young people are able to tweet and share stories on Facebook, why are we not seeing that on TV? Instead of seeing the aspires, I'd rather have a youth-dedicated show where I hear the voice of the youth of this country, because in essence, that is our future. My children will then be raised or led by the young people that I see then on those shows. Not a single show on our national television that is dedicated, led by, run by youth, that is popular as the ones that we know. So I really think that another focus is formalizing the creative economy and ensuring that our GDP growth mirrors the needs and the wants of the young people of this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity and the Accord on Global Peace. First of all, I would like to come as a foreigner side, because I'm a foreigner in this country. And I'd like to talk to the fellow colleagues that just raised their point. The question I will ask is this, because the gentleman just said everything has been taken about the foreigners, everything did about the foreigners. Who told you that we are foreigners? We have been brainwashed as Africans. Who told you this is South African? What JCI is trying to do is we have a program called I Am Africa. If you leave this continent and you go to another Africa, you are an African. The gentleman in the middle, as it is, if me and him go to Europe, they'll take him as a Europe, they'll take me as an African, because of the color. We all African. There's nothing like I'm Nigeria, I'm Malawi, I'm Zimbabwe, I'm South African. We all African. If we leave this place and enter Zimbabwe, I'm still an African. My language might be different, my culture might be different. Inside me, I'm still an African. But we end up having this kind of brainwash from who colonized us. I said, you are Zimbabwe. You need visa to come. That is what UN is trying to do now, or AU rather. They're trying to do about trading within the Africa. That you can bring your goods from South Africa and go to Zimbabwe without paying a tax and do your business. Interchange within all Africans. So we settle down and saying that African is taking, foreigner is taking our lands, foreigner is taking, we end up saying, the second question is, how many exposure do we have? Exposure matters in what we do. If we go outside there, okay, there's an opportunity we're seeing in your country. That's why the foreigners came into your country. The GDP, what the foreigners contribute to your country, is going a long way. How many, I'm a businessman and I employ South African, I may not pay them what privates are paying, but I'm solving some problems, paying them salary because they take something home for their families. It's part of what the foreigners are taking. And the buildings are saying that the foreigners are taking is not free. They are buying it. It's someone that is selling it for them. So we need to sit down and look what are the things that we Africans have to do ourselves. Than to take a fine. You can say that even when I saw the news, what is happening in Soweto, I said, these are Africans to Africans doing things to themselves. It's not a project we're supposed to be. It's a brainwash. We have been brainwashed. We have been programmed. We need to just open ourselves to accommodate ourselves. If you move to my country now, they will adopt you in. They will never hear that they burn something down there. It won't happen. It won't. And the last one is for the media saying, the young lady saying that they rather see a debating on the young youth. The question is, would the media wanted to project that because of money they wanted to receive? Business is business. Because they rather, what do you call it, MTN rather pay billions of rands or millions of rands to project a coin is a buyer than to come to the youth dialogue, because they won't see anything that they want to buy from it. Because the rate, I have a friend that works in the media, the rate that they were able to generate for people watch coin in from 9 to 9:30 is a lot than watching a Ramaphosa speech going on in just 30 minutes. So it's business that they are generating to people's mind. They are selling something to our unconscious mind. And if we don't have access to the media, we have access to the social media, and we can take it to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think that's... Oh, okay.
Last question, and then I have some input. Sure. Thank you, everyone. My name is Katleho. I'm from Guatemala, and thank you for extending the invite. I think for me, one of the most important things that we are looking at when we talk about the issues that we're discussing is that we are so focused on xenophobia, we are so focused on employment, we're so focused on issues that we don't really want to address. When we talk about xenophobia, we are not talking about xenophobia in terms of black and white. We are talking about xenophobia in terms of attacking other black people from African countries. And that is a very important thing that we never take note of. My brother can say we are brainwashed, and he's correct when he says that. That is a valid point. If you go to Sandton, you have a guy who's from Germany who owns a whole building in Sandton, but because he's white, we do not go and attack that man. But a guy who's from Ghana and he's black and he understands the struggle of being black, we look at them and we say, they are doing something that is not wrong. They are foreigners and we are insulting them. Recently, China City, guys. Are we going to ignore the fact that they raided Johannesburg, but we still have China City? Are we then saying that those Chinese people have a right to be here and black Africans do not have a right to be here? And that is a very important thing that we need to look into. When we talk about being African, where do we start? How do we go about? How do you say I represent an African, and yet when I look at the next person who's black, I see them as somebody that is not African? But we are quick to speak about how important it is for for Africans to be removed from our countries, how they are illegal, how they are looting this country, but we are not taking responsibility of the fact that we are looking at it from a black perspective. We are not looking at it beyond the borders. An American can come here and that person is a foreigner. And we are being ignorant to that. We are so quick to adapt to their culture, to their tradition, but we are incapable of adapting to another person's African culture. So we need to reassess and reevaluate those values. I mean, white people can sorry, I'm not trying to be racist, but I'm trying to bring a point that says, why is xenophobia black on black? Why? What constitutes xenophobia to be black against black? Why can't xenophobia be black against white? Because we are so focused on saying we need to fix our country. And I'm not saying that our brothers and sisters from African countries are not doing illegal activities. Yes, we know they do. But also, who is the leader? Who is it that is supplying all of that? And that is a very important question that we need to ask ourselves. Who is supplying all of those things? Thank you.
Thank you. So before I hand back to the panel to answer some of these questions, I'm going to stop questions now because that was a lot to digest, and for them to give proper feedback to what you've asked, we need to stop for a bit so they can answer. So just from my side, the issue of fourth industrial revolution and how we need to focus more on technology, I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that, in the sense that I don't know if we have a competitive advantage as South Africa in technology. So looking around, immediately I would link it both to what both advocates mentioned. One was technology, the other was the agricultural revolution. Why are we as South Africans fixating on the need to play catch up on technology when there's other sectors we are competitive in? So the issue of SAA, we're asking why we're doing constant bailouts. Geographically, South Africa is the bottom of the continent. We're not a hub. There's no reason to fly all the way down here only to connect to a flight at the top. We'll never be competitive in that, so we'll continue to do bailouts. So it's a thought on reforming our economy, so also reforming our thinking on where we need to be competitive in terms of what resources we have, not what the global political economy is dictating. So while I do agree we do need to shift our thoughts and skills in terms of technological capacitation and identifying what the jobs are needed and what the skills are to cater to those jobs, I also don't think it needs to be limited to only technology. I don't see what the issue is in rural communities, which is our South African heritage, to push for innovation in farming or agriculture or more sustainable agriculture or shifting the skills to subsistence living again, because we kind of project this need that you have to go to a city, you have to get an education, and in terms of what our infrastructure and our education system and the economy can furnish, it's not a reality that we're going to outcompete a Singapore in technology. So that was just something I'll put to you in terms of what was raised, and I think it was also really clear in terms of, you mentioned not everyone has an education, so I think it links to what you said. Throughout the plenary session, the issue of the community was raised. So just to clarify from my side, so Global Peace targeted specifically the community, specifically young people, so we invited all the schools. Unfortunately, they were not willing to attend because of exams coming up. There are a number of issues with resources, whether they can physically get here. The invitation was also, our model is to engage with a local interlocutor, which is why we focused on making sure we are partnering with the city of Ekurhuleni, because we don't have the local knowledge to know who to invite. So that's our format going forward. Conceptually, just for further conceptual clarification, we raised also in terms of sustainability and what is the impact on the community. Do we just do it and then disappear? No. The model for this is essentially we host a dialogue which we hope that the community engages with, then we give that structure to the community to host their own dialogues going forward, but with local actors and local facilitators. This is just a case study. So beyond that, for example, a conversation or a dialogue session that I think would be important in this community is the conversation around xenophobia, because that has the potential to precipitate into a conflict and a violence.
As the city, our mayor, Councillor Mzondile Masina, as part of his flagship programs, he has instructed, he's very strict about this, us as the city, as the municipality, to start lobbying and advocating for a university, but a special one of its kind. The concept is EastU, the Ekurhuleni Applied Science and Technology University, that will look specifically into these technological advances that will assist the economy to catch up in terms of its fair share of the global economy. So we want to have something that will look into robotics, look into artificial intelligence, manufacturing at advanced stage. So it's one of the things that as the city we are doing. But lastly, and I think it's the common or shared view, and I must say this with caution, in that, or maybe with a question, to say, if we want to solve the problems, we must then separate the issues. If we want to solve the issue of xenophobia, we must separate it from some of the other problems that we have. Is it a question of a new nationhood that is creating contradictions in society called xenophobia? Because if it's an issue of a new nationhood, this country has over time signed many treaties. There's a SADC treaty that it has signed about our custom duties and trade within our southern region. And with that, it would obviously include mobility of people or other nations within the region alone coming into South Africa, and South Africa trading with the region. In other words, labor markets, the labor dynamics change. By implication, if labor dynamics change and there's a new labor force, we are to expect that there will be foreign nationals who are coming in from other countries. In fact, to an extent, some of our SADC treaties look to actually eradicating borders within our region. So what is the issue? The issue is not one from a governance or from a trade perspective, right? Is it then an issue of cosmology or cosmology based on a capitalist economic infrastructure? So, in other words, are we scrambling for economic development as Africans within South Africa, but born about, I don't know, by the capitalist social ills such as crime? So what are the issues? But what I do, what it is common around the issues or around the problems or conditions that we're finding ourselves as society, is that it all has to do with addressing the economic question. Because like Katleho said, I mean, and it's true, I mean, you want to deal with the issue of counterfeit goods in Hillbrook, but you leave China City, right? But you can expand that. White people have something that they call GMOs, genetically modified organisms. So they actually create fake seeds, fake chicken. That's the best form of counterfeit goods ever. But we eat it, right? And we don't go and strike or protest against them. I mean, they've got fake medicine. So a pharmaceutical company can design or can come up with a cure for something, and then they sell at what is called a generic license. So it's a byproduct of the original form of medicine. And we use those vitamins and those antibiotics. Those are counterfeits, but we'll never ever stand up against white people against those types. So it's not really an issue of crime. So the issue is an economic question, and we really need to address that economic question, which then takes me back to my first point. Look, we need a new economic system. We need new anything, a new nationhood, a new economic system, and we need to really drive this economic system through what I was saying, the first point, through technology and education. In my view, it's the only way. We'll never catch up. I mean, just my last parting point, and I know my fellow council made that point. I was attending a different lecture a few days ago, and we were unpacking the four industrial revolutions. So we know, okay, the first one, steam engine. Second, energy through electricity and oil. Third, I think third was IT, ICT and information. Then the fourth is where we are, artificial and robotics. That's the fourth. But if you look at the current state of South Africa, you find that the major crisis in this country right now is energy, Eskom. So it means that South Africa, we are still in the second industrial revolution. We've got a crisis. Eskom can collapse any day. And it means, and by virtue of struggling with what is free energy, right? The sun, the solar. This whole place is using solar. We're struggling with that. This whole place right here is using solar energy. This whole precinct there's a solar farm right there. But in South Africa, we are struggling with the second industrial revolution. It leaves much to be desired, but we won't solve the problem by trying to resolve the issues of Eskom. We can only resolve the issues by coming coming up with innovative ways through technology to catch up economically. That's my parting view.
Thank you.
I think the point raised by Bongi regarding inequality is actually central to all the issues that everyone has brought forward, because the frustration faced by our local communities is driven mainly because the poor are continuously remaining poor. And I think there's a relationship between inequality, unemployment, and education. And in order to get to addressing any form of inequality, we need to invest a lot in the education. One of the biggest points Bongi raised was with regards to majority of our people, where do they live? In townships and in rural areas. But yet, a lot of the development that is happening in our country is in urban areas. So my recommendation would be, we need to start investing more in our local communities. What is the engagement that private sector is doing in order to create opportunities in our local areas, to eliminate this problem of people having to take 3 forms of transportation in order to be able to participate in the economy. So what is actually happening in our communities to enable economic growth? What are the opportunities that we're bringing forth? If we look at the frustrations that were raised by one of the locals of what, which brings them to the point of being frustrated with foreigners, it is because when they were growing up, they saw their own fathers and mothers leading businesses in the area. But because of lack of skills, the truth of the matter is our foreign brothers came and they saw an opportunity and they've been using the opportunities. If you were given the opportunity to take over that spaza shop, do you have the skills and resources to be able to run successfully those businesses? So the area that we need to invest in is the skills development. Entrepreneurship is not a skill that we as South Africans have developed well. A lot of we got exposed to a lot of, you need to go and study in order to get a job. So we may be fighting the system, but we're actually not even equipped enough to be able to manage these opportunities, even if they will be given to us. So there's an area of development of getting proper skills invested in young people. Our education system, currently there's not alignment to where the future is going with what our students are learning in school. We have an issue of unemployment, but people are training to get skills that are going to eventually leave them unemployed because there's only so many jobs that they can get. But perhaps the education system needs to start looking at where are we going as a people? Where are we as South Africa in terms of skills development? I truly believe there's an area of development when it comes to entrepreneurship that we can start doing even from an early age, where people are exposed to planting their own gardens at home and selling those and generating income. It's a skill not only entrepreneurially, but also in advancing agriculture. There's an opportunity that hasn't been exploited in agriculture, especially in our township areas. People do not know how to do plain gardening. And it's those little things that we need to start identifying and equipping ourselves in order to be able to participate.
I don't think we are the passerbyers. You know how in Africa, you will always travel and share your knowledge, experiences, but as long as it's occupied and it is still employed, we cannot say that the communities are active anymore. Since 1994, I can tell communities are disengaged. They are not re-engaged. So for the communities to be disengaged again is what others will say is people fight over the audience and people want to come to the dialogues for their own talk. Even IDPs, people don't attend them anymore. Even political parties, when you think of depoliticization of this country, it is even the media itself has even have that current project. So our people, they don't want to even come and participate, but our people, they are boiling inside. Today, most of you are not aware, it is a Saturday. 15 countries are meeting in Tanzania, what we call frontline states. our liberation was not only championed by people who were in exile. Tanzania played a role, Zambia played a role. But we are not reminiscing at all. We cannot talk about no, but was exile when others were in exile. So when you have to deal with the issue of Afrophobia, the question it is that we have raised it here, inequalities, sharing of resources, of the resources. What happened in Alex in the early 1994, in 2004, many reports from the United Nations human rights reports are very clear about us to say South Africans are not tolerant. South Africans are angry with everything. But if you look at the report again of Human Rights Commission year 2008, this area, the East Rand, Ramaport, it was mentioned as one of the areas where tensions were there. But only the Maspal, traditional arts and culture programs, where is the cultural diversity programs there? You know, and even I think the other aspect that we are talking about, the youth not being engaged. The youth are engaged, and there are many institutions in this country. Only National Youth Development Agency, NLA before National Youth Commission. And maybe those current structures need to be, I don't know, you know, when your system crashes, you say you have to reboot the systems. It is like we are in that sense of where people have lost signals, people don't have data of thinking, and people have lost the signal of understanding even Africa. And I am going to Africa. When I also the SADC region, by the way, I am going to Africa, whereas we go West Africa or we go East. And at the Berlin conference, as one person was saying that we are brainwashed. I don't think it was unfair or it was critical for him. I think it was a positive critique, but we should understand, the issues of peace goes along the issue of justice, social justice. If there is no justice for our communities, there will always be tensions. You know, and I don't think again that we are just talking to ourselves. Some of us, we are talking on radio and TV on a daily basis, on these issues, on a daily basis. And the Karibu fella like us go that, by the way, we go Kadipo didn't at or about Baru. Because how I can go come out to Baruna, how about Mutu, Kakizuba, Kadidi Tomar, we are going to. So, who talk about related even the list of languages? Karibu, we should not only speak in one language. The UN language limits you to French and English and Spanish. African Union and SADC, it is broadening you to even speak which we are pushing in the schools now, beyond knowing the Chinese language and the Indian language. So now then the language of peace must be the language of using both culture and music. That's how we can get peace, because peace, it is a process. It is even a spiritual journey. So we don't just sign a peace accord and we say people have signed peace. We see the conflicts in Africa, people are signing peace deals, but tomorrow there's war. So even in this country, South Africa, we have not went through a healing process. We have not went through the healing process. And this narrative center, as it used to be where people meet underground, but the young people are no longer meeting underground, they meet on the social media. We should understand, these young people are no longer meeting in the corners. They want to be engaged through the social media, and the schools, I can assure you, we have a challenge with our education system. And I think if we don't deal with our education system, then put the blame on universities and on the training centers.
Wow, powerful stuff. Also, I mean, just also going to the Africa debate. Africans, we will have a youth bulge by 2050. We will have the average age will be 25 years old, so that's very young. And I know there's recognition within South Africa, within our foreign policy as well, that South Africa will only prosper when the rest of the African continent prospers with us. We know there's been so much from exile days and beyond that. There's always been relationships, there's always been a movement of people, and these borders are so artificial and so on. Also, once you go past the South African border, there is so much cultural exchange happening. People know about Kwaito. They're also listening between West Africa and East Africa. There's an exchange is happening. And I think we also need to somehow amplify that here. So I think what's also important in this conversation is, yes, we have the AfCFTA, that African Continental Free Trade Area, which is very exciting. But let's not forget, South Africa is a bully in the region. We have huge businesses all over the continent that closes up their shops, that closes up their industries, and we are, making an income here. So right now, one of the big debates in the Continental Free Trade Area is from our trade unions. Our trade unions are saying, we don't want to establish value chains, so businesses that cross borders, because then we in South Africa will lose out. So we have a burden as South Africa to give back, recognize the contribution from the rest of the continent in creating this new dispensation. But at the same time, we also then have a burden to then see to the needs of our brothers and sisters who are coming across the borders. So it is highly complex, and if you're looking at the inequality in South Africa, it's not just South Africa, as much as we're the worst in the world, it is a global inequality. We have a domestic elite, but there's also a global elite. So my fear is, say we go put private businesses, say, yeah, go into the township, set up a mall. You're going to be an employee for the rest of your life, if you're lucky, because the chances are some faceless shareholder who lives in Germany, Europe, India, wherever, they're going to be saying, we need more profits, cut this employee's check. So we are vulnerable. We are all vulnerable. And this is why it's so important that we organize to not only address the inequality within this country and pressure private sector to pay the taxes, to be taxed appropriately, but also to take responsibility and set up the entrepreneurs and all of that we were talking about. One important issue that I also think we must highlight is the illicit financial flows. So they say within the African continent, only about 5% of corruption, of the corruption contributes to illicit financial flows. Much more than official development assistance, so the aid that we get. Illicit financial flows is likely double or triple or 10 times the amount of aid that this continent gets. And so from the local municipality level, all the way up to these massive faceless shareholders, these big companies that are registered in the Americas or wherever, they all have a role to play that we need to call for, to account for how their profits are going back into the communities that they're taking from. I mean, look at the mining that's happening here and where that's going. And so, with this whole international dynamic, I thought it was interesting about intellectual property rights. Because yes, there's a lot of great technology that's coming out of South Africa, but also the amount that we put towards research and development is not as significant as it was. For instance, in the case of the CSIR, our Center for Scientific Research Institute and Innovation, which sits in Pretoria, they had a whole lot of money coming from Armscor, our arms manufacturer. As Armscor, which is now called Denel, by the way, and is losing a whole lot of money and is no longer sustainable, they can't even pay their workers. Armscor Denel now can't afford to give CSIR the money that they need for research and development. So where is this wonderful technology coming from? The pressure is again back to the citizens to group together their own money and invest it in this type of research. So what's the alternative? We look at international technologies out there and we say, yes, we want that solar panel or whatever it is. Intellectual property rights are a huge block in trying to access that type of technology here, to reduce the burden of, for instance, not accessing electricity or poor water quality. So how do we as an international community address that inequality of design and accessing that type of research? That research comes from taxes that probably came at some point from the mining company that's right here. So we have, there's certainly something that we need to be asking for. And just the last comment is just about the social compact. So, I mean, in society, I thought your commenters was so accurate about how the news that we're hearing is from the urban side. We don't hear about the rural, and that we need to spread more opportunities around. In order for that to happen, we have as well a domestic elite, we have a domestic middle class, we all have vested interests. We need to come together and talk about solidarity.
to say that South Africa's trajectory is going to get worse unless some of us give up the privileges, or some of the privileges that we have, that we share and redistribute the gains that we have from this democracy. So I'm hoping that in this push for climate justice, trying to address and create a more sustainably developed world and community, that we'll be able to find that leverage points to agree to a new social compact where everybody, the rich, the poor, the white, black, Indian, and so on, all come together and try to do better. We all have to step up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think those were some very thought-provoking questions, and I think we've had some very thought-provoking responses to them. So thank you again to the panel. Nikita, I'm just checking on time if we have time for a quick round two of questions.
4 questions.
If we can do 4 questions in the final round, so first 4 hands up, first come, first serve, or comments, or thoughts, or take-backs.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Mine is more of a contribution as opposed to a question. I just wanted to say that before I'm a South African, I'm an African, and before I'm even African, I'm black. So we need to get that straight from the hearts, not even from our minds. That when I look at a fellow black man, before I even know that this is someone from maybe he was born and bred in the West, I see a fellow black man. I think that's a message that we need to engrave in our minds before we even enter into any other discussions. Who are you? And you're black. I like what my sister was saying, to say there's a lot of the things that we're trying to fight against our fellow black men. There's a lot of it, and even more deadly, that is coming to the other races, but we seem to be fighting amongst each other. But now, to then come from another perspective is to say, I think the challenge is, had our fellow black men, if they had the access to those guys who are doing the same thing but who are in Santim, if they had immediate access, they would execute the xenophobic attacks to them. But now the challenge is those people are further from them, so they'll express their frustration to the very next person. And just maybe to put it across, it is not always xenophobic. It does not always get expressed on a xenophobic perspective. It even gets expressed on a tribal level. So then maybe it gets to be exposed more when it comes to xenophobia, because there's that term xenophobia. I don't even know how it means and what it means, etc. But what I'm saying is, the problem is these people are frustrated, and they're frustrated at grassroots level, and they're going to attack and express their frustration on a grassroots level. Maybe if it was someone who is in Santin, he would find ways of attacking the person who's in Santin at that level. But we're looking at it from our community level, at grassroots level. Then the one last thing that I wanted us to do, to look into is, I like what Simpiwe said, to say we need to be the change that we want to see. We need to take ownership. When we got here, we had a couple of questions to say, okay, fine, this was built 6 years back. Who built it? Was the community here involved in building up the structure? Did it benefit the community? In terms of the running of this whole place, is it being run and managed by people from within this community, or we see people coming from other places coming to run it? One of our colleagues had to go to the loo, and there are grievances that came up from there. But the whole question is, what is the community doing about that? That's an opportunity for someone from around the community to benefit from it. We are seeing there's solar panels and everything that's benefiting this facility, which is not benefiting the community. And the room or the house next door has got that type of a toilet, when we're talking about a toilet system that is impressive here. So I'm saying let's take ownership of whatever is happening within our communities, so that if we take ownership, we're going to be responsible for it. And with that being done, the energies won't be channeled towards anger one to another, but it will be channeled to the development of that which you've taken ownership of.
Thank you. My name is Vigindugu Mkonza. Part of my concerns have been addressed, but I wanted to confine myself to the issue of education, particularly in Ekurhuleni. The brother there made mention that there are plans to put up a university in Ekurhuleni. We all know that the Ekurhuleni Council has been toying around that idea, and they're doing so without addressing that with their community's interest. The issue of a university has been in the database, or rather in the radar, for the last 10, 15 years. And yet, this Ekurhuleni, I don't know whether this mayor in particular, it's now that he's thinking of considering putting up the university here. Part of my colleagues here made mention of the fact that there are hundreds of young people who are not at school, who are always referred to as NEET, not employment. They are not in employment, they are not in education, and they are also not in training. This is because of lack of a university in the region. We are the only region that does not have a university. Remember that Ekurhuleni is an orotropolis. It's a city that has an airport, a very important means of communication. We here at Ekurhuleni have a plant that manufactures locomotives and trains. We in this area, we are a home, or we are going to be a home to the biggest inland port in Africa. Just 10 kilometers down the line here, you are going to have the biggest inland port in Africa. It's called Tambo Springs. Here is a cancer, as my brother pointed out, that they are just passable. Here is a cancer that still toys around a university. Whereas there are these challenges that our youngsters are faced up. And these are the things that our youth should be prepared. And yet we are still talking about a university that is still at a planning stage. Until such time that Ekurhuleni Council sit down with the residents who knows this history of this region, there is nothing that is going to happen here, my brother. You have mentioned that 14% of the people in Ekurhuleni have post-matric. And I can tell you straight here that this region that we are in here in South Africa had the richest and the deepest gold mines in the whole world. This region that we are in here. And also, this region is one of the most unstable community in South Africa, post-1976. The most anger and the bitterness that is in this country is more in this region than any parts of the country. And yet the government, through the local governments, are still playing marbles without addressing the very same issues of creating an institutions that will bring about peace within the communities. You speak of xenophobia. I think you must have heard that most of the speakers here touch on that issue. That indicates the level of education. It is because of the level of institutions that we don't have here in the region. There are 2 TVET colleges here in the region. This region is made up of more than 9 cities, plus 9 what you call townships. And we have more than 90 post-primary schools. And yet, we don't have a university that will take care of these unemployed youth, give them the skills, give them the knowledge that they need to create peace with the rest of mankind. My dear sister mentioned the industry, the private sector. He speaks of skills mismatch. And yet, here is the biggest inland port that the government has approved. We don't see the private sector coming and saying to the communities, to the schools, let us see how we can engage those kids who are at school. Let us engage those kids who are outside school at the moment. So that is why there will always be anger. Anger goes with frustration. Frustration is caused by lack of resources. So as long as the government, the central government and the regional government are not going to sit and engage with the communities and address the challenges that the brother has mentioned of water, storage, housing, we are still going to live with anger in this community until a new government, I don't know that kind of government, but until a new government that's going to emerge is the one that can bring about peace. So I'm making a special appeal to the organizers of this event that we appreciate this initiative, and as they've indicated that this is not the last, this is the beginning. We need to take it forward, go back to our respective communities, discuss about these very issues. We hope you people coming from Ekurhuleni, you'd make this facility available for such talk. Let this facility be used rather than becoming a white elephant. Because this facility, I can tell you, it is underutilized. And yet the communities around here cannot come and discuss these issues. So I'm taking it upon you guys that you are now taking the responsibility that from now on, when we meet again, maybe next year, we would have had 1 or 2 kind of sessions whereby the community of Ekurhuleni, together with our fellow expatriates from other countries, we share the same platform. Lastly and closingly, not so long ago, there were international softball games here in Bosbeck. There were no people at all. Today, there is international women rugby games here in Brakpa. And the finals are being played today. And I can tell you straight, you can go there. You won't find nobody in those games. These are some of the challenges that you people, particularly in Ekurhuleni, you need to have your pulse or your fingers on the pulse. You need to catch up. You need to wake up. Because as long as we continue with this trend, we'll always have these problems of anger. Thank you.
The last question, because that went on. My question is with regards to education. I have a problem with you saying we are ready for the 4th Industrial Revolution, simply because we have a high rate of illiteracy. I work with kids which are in grade 8 and 9, and they can't even construct a sentence. And when you look at the statistics for children in grade 4, it's very scary. And then yet you say we are ready to move into 4th Industrial Revolution. And when you look at our education system, it is failing our kids, it is failing us, because it channels us into that mindset of saying, you must become an employee and not an employer. And I want to go back to what you said, Simpiwe, about entrepreneurship. How I'm seeing entrepreneurship right now in our country. Entrepreneurship is something that we look at when academics have failed. It is not something that is implemented from a very young age. It's not instilled in us, especially in the black community, as opposed to our white maybe counterparts who are brought up in families where financial literacy is the language that is spoken. So for me personally, I feel we need to implement and ensure that financial literacy and entrepreneurship is started from a very young age, from as early as 2 years. Children need to start creating small little things. I have a friend whose daughter is selling rings which are made from elastic bands. And that child is only 8. Imagine if we support that child. By the time they reach 18, how far will they be?
Good day. My name is Mary. I'm actually really angry and frustrated. For one, I run a foundation called Tony Fundo Foundation, which we help kids to further their studies. So I'm basically going to speak on education. For one, the city of Ekurhuleni does nothing in helping our kids further their studies. We have bursaries, but we don't even know who the beneficiaries are. When you go ask, who are the beneficiaries, when is the application, no one is telling you anything. When you go to this person, they refer you to the other, you go to the other, the one refers you to the next one. So it's really frustrating that we have so many kids that want to further their studies, but the city on its own is not even supporting us. You know, it's really frustrating. And then one other thing is that if it wasn't for NSFAS, most of the kids in Ekurhuleni wouldn't even be studying. Yet we have a municipality that claims that they have bursaries for kids that should further their studies. It's really difficult. Then when you approach the stakeholders, like we have tried approaching the youth of the directorate to say, we have kids that we have applied for, but institutions cannot process their applications because they don't have money. So can you at least meet us halfway? We've sent emails, we call, we don't get a response. Then how do we continue trying to help the community if people that are able to help us are not even trying to help us? You know, one other thing is that as the youth, I'll speak again on behalf of the youth, we always get such things. People come here, speak, and make it as if we as the youth are lazy. We don't want to do anything. We're trying to get jobs, but the truth of the matter is that Ekurhuleni, for you to get a job, you need to know someone for you to get a job. You need to be an ANC affiliate for you to get a job. It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because it's not as if we're just sitting down and we don't want to do anything with our lives. There's so many things that we want to do. There's so many programs that we want to do that will develop skills. But because we don't have funding, those ideas are good as nothing. Because we knock on doors to say, this is what I want to do to empower the youth. This is what I want to do to actually develop skills. But because I umeri asmazi, then the idea is not entertained. But if it's someone that is active in the ANC, then their ideas are being entertained. It's really frustrating because as a municipality, I believe we are not there because you are ANC. You are as a municipality that has to be there for everyone. Whether I'm ANC, whether I'm PAC, you need to adhere to our cries every time we come to you guys. Like even this event, I work here, I have a workshop, I didn't even know there was an event, and then you come and say we are not participating, but we are not being informed of such things. You know, because it's really frustrating. We really want to participate. We really want to bring ideas. We really want to work together. But we are being sidelined in everything that is happening. So how then do we work together to make the world better if we are being sidelined? So that is what I just wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for those last comments, questions, insights, a few challenges in there, which are always great to hear, and I think some really good, robust conversation that definitely needs to continue going forward in these forums and other forums, formally, informally. There's definitely a need for that. I'm going to, for one last time, go through and hand over to the panelists for any responses to comments that have been directed at them, and then just lastly for their closing and final thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I think most of the questions are targeted at the city. And I happen to be a panelist representing the city of Ekurhuleni. I am the divisional head of the Ekurhuleni Youth Directorate in the office of the mayor. So I'd have a better overview of what's happening in the city due to the position that I occupy. But I think first we must welcome the robust interaction. We take no qualm when our people are unhappy about some of the things that are happening. They're welcome, but some need to be corrected. For an example, the lady from, I think Tolumfund, right? The NGO Tolumfund, I've had a discussion with her, and we've interchanged in terms of email. So what they do is that they try to provide registration fees for youth who cannot afford to pay registration fees, right? Now, and the challenge we have as a city is that, and it's a limitation of all governments, is that we're regulated and limited. So as a city, we cannot, it's not within the policies that we have where we can pay registration for youth that can't afford registration. But as a city, we've got one of the biggest flagship education programs out of all the municipalities in the country. We fund every year 100 million rand worth in bursaries. And it's not a small figure, it's a huge accolade. 100 million every year. To date, every year, this year, there's about almost 400 young people through our bursary program who graduating. We take about 1,618 within our bursary database, fully paid for. You're speaking about food, transportation, if they need transportation. So it's a full bursary by all means, because we are trying to, the previous speaker spoke, the penultimate speaker, we are trying to make up for the fact that, yes, we don't have a university in Ekurhuleni. We don't have a knowledge economy that is wide enough to absorb the challenges we have for youth in Ekurhuleni. We don't. And the challenge we have, we're not just passing or rolling council. Council is not just playing around or toying around with the idea. The major challenge that we have is that a university or the establishment of a university is not within the jurisdiction of a municipality. It just simply isn't. It is the competence of the Department of Higher Education. So we cannot do it, but what our mayor has done, because this idea of a university is a flagship, he has put up first a task team that is going to advocate, mobilize resources, and speaks to the head about the establishment of a university. I happen to be part of that task team, and to an extent we had a meeting, funny enough, just yesterday, Thursday, it was Thursday, where we had a meeting about and that. And there's many other advances that have been made. One, we had held a symposium to say this is the type of university that we want. We established this task team. Two, the task team came up with a feasibility study. So there's resources that are channeled towards the establishment of a university within this administration. So there's resources through a feasibility study. And then three, we approached the head. And I can say now where we are, the only thing maybe that we might be disagreeing with are the form of modalities that maybe the head is coming with and what we are proposing. But the commitment to establish a university here in Ekurhuleni has already been taken. We might not get what we want, but it's already there. So I just thought I should limit myself to those few. I'm very passionate myself around the idea, not just of the university, about knowledge economies. We've got Tibet, you're right, we've got Ekurhuleni East and Ekurhuleni West. It's got satellites, so there's 13 Tibet colleges across the spread of Ekurhuleni. We've got community colleges, we've got 15 across the city of Ekurhuleni. But we don't have some other kind of synergy when it comes to knowledge economies. So it's not just about the issue or the idea of getting young people to be educated, but what are the economies around those institutions? Speaking about, for an example, I would expect young people would be here from student organizations to complain about the lack of residences within these Tibet and accessibility. And so our challenge is that. So with this idea of a university, in part what we are going to be doing is creating these knowledge economies. So I think just to be brief, and also looking at time, I thought maybe I should just attend to those two, or to correct those two issues and say that the city is not toiling around. We are working very hard. to address some of these things. But lastly, and I think is something that I already put to Accord, is that we want to actually challenge them to come relaunch a dialogue, working with the Youth Directorate, myself in particular, in fact at this very place, at the time of their convenience. Because I think many people, I got an invitation, funny enough, as an official, to be a panelist. So I was also equally not as abreast of this program as perhaps I should have been, because the implementing agent was one of our departments. But we want to challenge you to say that, let's say this was consultative, it was not a proper dialogue. Let us have a proper formulated dialogue, which will be led by the Ekurhuleni Youth Directorate. Thanks.
My comment perhaps at this stage is more on accountability and transparency. I think a lot that's been raised today and the frustrations that our communities are facing, a lot is actually being done from what we hear, especially by local government, but it seems the people are not aware. So my suggestion would be, let us create platforms where we are more transparent and we're communicating what is actually happening, because a lot of us sit in corners of frustrations. For example, the lady from Tolulwa's, Tolimfundo, if she was aware of what the local government has already done and what other avenues and who are the kids that are currently where they need to be knocking, because clearly people are knocking, but the avenues that they're using are not the right channels. So let's be more accountable and transparent and engage with our communities on platforms that they are engaging on. Ekurhuleni, are you present on social media? What is the communication? Because that's where a majority of our young people are. That's where the majority of the community that is frustrated is sitting. I think that would be the comment of, let's all be accountable and transparent with what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think mine, it will be very short. I will think that maybe the future dialogue, as it will be coming back again in this area, considering that next month I was sharing with the colleagues in Angola, there will be a meeting of more than 12 African countries on the same concept of peace and culture and issues around innovation, the new thinking. Because we can sit and dialogue and talk, but if we always problematize issues, we are always having problems, but we don't have solutions. And when we know that solutions lies even within our histories, our elders, who have the knowledge, I think that's where we can be able to find one another, but at the same time deal with these issues of underdevelopment. That's what Walter Rodney once said, that how Europe underdeveloped Africa, but at the same time Africa developed Europe. And at the same time, communities that we are in are being developed by their own communities. But at some point, I want to say that it will be proper for us to think about the month of September, as we are aware that 21 September is the International Peace Day. But you can't have peace without justice, and you can't have peace that does not include what was raised earlier, creative economy. That's another area that one person that has raised. We are struggling in our ministry. Local municipalities, in your arts and culture, I think we need to beef up the issue of creative economy and even the issues around SABC. When somebody was talking about media earlier, we needed to know that even our SABC, it is in tatters because we did not invest in our national media, our community media, our local media, our community radio stations, our community papers. What are they writing? What are they even communicating? Because sometimes you can be lamenting about the media, but we have a national media and SABC that is going down. And that is the main, one can say, an intervention in terms of driving peace and as well as the power of music. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo as well my sister when she was saying about how youth are not lazy. They are doing things to survive. And there's important projects that are being conducted by the United Nations, by the African Union, for instance, focusing on the role of youth in peace building and, and conflict prevention. So there's resolutions from these international platforms that are used. But hearing you today, I'm wondering, so what exactly is happening in the community? Who is documenting these young people who are doing amazing things with nothing, with no assistance? So maybe this is something that we can start as a community, as looking into these individuals who, despite obstacles, are able to overcome them to some extent, and see then from there where this inspirational stories could lead to, and hopefully unlock this additional access to funding or whatever it might be from there. Thank you.
So thank you very much to everyone who's come out today, for your engagement, for your comments, for your questions, for your challenges, for your insights, for your and even for the frustration where it's been there. It's all part of what we, through Accord and Global Peace, are seeking to achieve and have conversations about. And I think the challenge from the city is one that Accord will take up. I think it's certainly needed, and it would be foolish for us to not. And I think that with greater community engagement, the conversation can only get better. If this is a sample size, then the full-on concentration will be that much more impressive and impactful. So just from our side, to again say thank you to everyone, to say thank you to our panelists. I wasn't joking earlier when I said it's always good when you take something new, and I've taken a lot new, and I think we all have, from their insights. So thank you so very much. And then a special thank you to our partners, in particular for here, to the city of Ekurhuleni, for all of your support in bringing this dialogue together. It definitely wouldn't have happened without you, and we look forward to a future partnership. But otherwise from us, until next time, that's the first South African Intergenerational Dialogue. Nikita, I don't know if there's any other housekeeping. None. But yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your weekend.